Welcome to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet with Ryan Poterack from Poterack Capital Advisory. You have unique values, objectives, fears, life experiences, and biases. Any financial professional who ignores or minimizes the importance of your story may not be able to help you achieve your ideal outcomes or hit your goals. It's time to experience the PCA difference. In this podcast, we help business executives, soon-to-be retirees, and solutions-based individuals overcome the anxiety leading up to their upcoming years. We do this by initiating in-depth discussions about the financial aspects of retirement, like tax planning and asset allocation, alongside, and often overlooked, personal and lifestyle aspects. Join us for this journey where we explore retirement from a contrarian point of view, as Ryan draws from years of experience and qualified guest professionals to help you explore the true purpose of your money in retirement and the impact you want to make in your golden years. Ryan Poterack and Alec Quaid offer investment advice through Private Advisor Group, which is a federally registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Private Advisor Group and Poterack Capital Advisory are separate entities. This information is not intended to be a substitute for individualized legal or tax advice. Please consult your legal or tax advisor regarding your specific situation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. This is Ryan Poterack. I want to introduce you to our new co-host, Charrise McCrorey. How you doing, Charisse?
I'm fabulous, Ryan. How are you?
Fabulous?
Fabulous.
Okay, I believe it. Most of the time you are fabulous.
Yep.
So what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about tax strategies and how a wealth manager can help with those.
Oh, that sounds like an idea you came up with.
Super fun.
Yes, automatically. You know, nobody wants to pay more taxes than they have to, but not a lot of people pay attention to it. And that's okay because it gives me work to do that I can be paid for.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let me get started with a question. Tell me then, what are the advantages of working with you with planning with my tax strategies?
Well, I guess first off, and as a disclosure, we don't file any tax returns. We're not in the tax preparation business, but from my experience, which is getting longer and longer these days, I think 34 years, most CPAs, most tax preparers do not do what I refer to as tax planning. They do historical arithmetic early every spring where you just kind of give them a shoebox or a bag full of documents and they put everything in the right place on your 1040 tax return. But at that time, they're filing a tax return for the prior year, so they really can't have any effect on the tax situation of their client. When I refer to tax planning, particularly in the fourth quarter of the year, as our audience is listening to this, throughout the year, we're looking at what tax strategies can impact, in this case, the 2024 tax year before New Year's Eve is over. And so this gets into, we have our clients upload their tax returns every year so we can look at what is their gross income, their taxable income, on their deductions. Do they use the standard deduction, itemized deductions, charitable giving, Roth conversions? There's a whole lot of moving parts that go into it, Charisse. Now, at the same time, for those in our audience that are earning a high income still through employment, and I'm not talking about small business people. There's a lot of things we can do with business people, but high income earners that are salaried, not a lot of tax flexibility. But for those in the audience that are approaching retirement or in retirement, that's when there's a bunch of different levers that we potentially can pull when we're seeking to improve a household's tax situation.
You just answered two questions. Yay, you.
Nice.
I was curious about how it differed between an actual earner and a retiree because I don't know. I guess I do now.
Well, for example, when a couple is employed, their salary or whatever that income is, I mean, that's a threshold of income that it kind of is what it is. Now, the day that you retire, you have no employment income by definition. So what are the income sources that are not employment? It could be rental income from property. It could be Social Security. It could be pensions. It could be dividends. It could be interest. It could be capital gains. We could be pulling money out of a taxable 401k or IRA, or we could be pulling money out of a tax-free Roth IRA. So there's more of an orchestra of income sources in retirement, and many of those have different tax consequences from all of the other instruments that happen to be in the orchestra. But while you're employed, it's basically one incoming hose of cash flow that pays for everything, and that's not something that can be manipulated. When I use that word, I mean it in a legal and positive sense for a couple's tax situation.
All right, so let's get into some of those strategies. The charitable giving, that one bugs me a little bit because it changed recently, and I just like to understand better what a retirement strategy might be for charitable giving tax exemptions.
Well, of course, charitable giving starts with a noble intent to support causes that the individual or couple cares about. And yeah, the landscape changed quite a bit when the last administration passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that went into effect in 2018 and sunsets after 2025. And the biggest impact in this area is the standard deduction was more than doubled. You see, a charitable contribution would be on the list of itemized deductions. However, if all of an individual or couple's itemized deductions, charitable giving, interest, local, state and local taxes, if that does not exceed the dollar value of the standard deduction, then there was absolutely no tax benefit for the charitable contribution. And so that's key, because when we raise the standard deduction, I think the number of households that were itemizing their deductions went down by like 2/3. A lot of charities really took a hit. Again, people like to give to causes they support, but if they can get a tax deduction, that's an obvious incentive. So that changed. So a couple of strategies that we use with clients. One would be stacking the charitable giving. Let's say that we had a household, a couple that consistently gave $10,000 every year to charity. However, that $10,000 in any individual year, along with other itemized deductions, did not exceed the standard deduction. And by the way, for our audience, depending on the age, the standard deduction in 2024 is roughly between $28,000 and $31,000. So it's a fairly high bar. If you have $10,000 in charitable contributions, you really need about another $20,000 in itemized deductions. And a lot of times in retirement, people have paid off their mortgage, they don't have mortgage interest, so on and so forth. So back to the example, I have a couple who gives $10,000 each and every year, but they don't get a tax benefit for that because their itemized deductions do not exceed the standard deduction. What I mean by stacking would be, if they have the liquidity, we might say, let's go ahead and establish a donor advised fund and put your $10,000, the next 5 years of charitable contributions, or 5 times $10,000, $50,000 in total. Let's put $50,000 in the donor advised fund. This is a separate account where the client would get the whole $50,000 would be an itemized deduction in that year. So they're easily going to exceed the standard deduction and get a significant tax benefit. At the same time, that account, the donor advised fund, the client has not yet chosen what charities they're going to distribute the money to. They can invest that account however they want. Let's say there's $50,000 in there. They can put it in stocks, bonds, you name it, just like any other account. The growth of this charitable account is income tax-free, similar to a Roth IRA growing income tax-free. And the client can choose how much they give to what charity any given subsequent year, but they also are not forced to give any money to charity in any particular year. They could just let it grow and have charities selected beyond their life that the money goes to. Now, having said all that, once they give the money to the $50,000 in this example, once they put it into their donor advised fund, Charisse, they have forever given up the use of that money, the same way as giving it to church and charity directly. So that's a way for people who are consistently giving to charity but not getting a tax benefit. And a tool we use is called a donor advised fund. Now, one strategy in retirement, because with this strategy you have to be 70 and a half years old, so that's the qualifier. Charisse, you and I don't qualify yet.
Nope.
I'm not in a hurry to qualify. I don't know about you.
Nope.
But if you're 70 and a half and you have a traditional IRA, you can give directly from your traditional, and by that I mean pre-tax IRA, where normally distributions from a traditional IRA are subject to income tax, where clients that are 70 and a half or older can give from their traditional IRA directly to their church or to charity. That's not a taxable distribution to the client, to the giver. It's not taxable to the charity because they're a charity. And also, if that same client is of an age, which would be 73 or older right now, where they have a required minimum distribution, that qualified charitable distribution goes towards meeting their RMD. And an individual can do up to $105,000 in 2024. A husband and wife then could do $210,000. So the limits are pretty high, but that's probably the most tax efficient way to give money to a charity, because you're giving pre-tax dollars away. Now, and because you're giving pre-tax away and not being taxed on it, that amount you don't also get to treat that as an itemized deduction. So you still get the full standard deduction. But those are two strategies I find, the donor advised fund and the qualified charitable distribution, or QCD, a lot of really smart people working with really smart tax preparers are surprised they're unaware of.
Yeah, that's a lot of details right there.
Yeah.
And, it's obviously, I'm going to give anyway, but if I can get some credit for it, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, think of the IRS as the middle person. And if you cut off the middle person, you could, in effect, give more to charity.
Right.
Or get more bang for your buck.
Right.
I guess a bonus strategy for all ages is you can give appreciated stock. Most charities and churches are set up to receive stocks themselves or shares of mutual funds. This is where, as an example, Charisse, let's say that you, in an after-tax account, invested $5,000 in, I'll make up a stock, $5,000 in ABC company stock. And that ABC stock grew from $5,000 that you invested into $10,000. You still own it. It's worth $10,000, those shares. And you have the desire to give $10,000 to charity. Well, you can give the shares of the stock worth $10,000 to the charity. And the advantage there is if you sold those shares yourself, then you'd have to pay capital gains tax on that $5,000 if it was a long-term capital gain. In other words, you held on to it for at least 1 year and 1 day. So I also see, kind of after the fact in talking to clients, where they liquidate stocks that have done well. I get it. People talk about, hey, sell at a high point. So they liquidate the stocks to cash, and then they write a check to the charity, but then they get a tax bill for the gain.
Right.
So giving appreciated securities, even if the value, $10,000 in that example, along with other itemized deductions, does not exceed the standard deduction, you still get the advantage of not having to pay a capital gain.
And that's why we need people like you in our life, Ryan, so we don't make that mistake.
Why? So you can get a headache?
Well, sometimes maybe.
Sometimes.
How about let's talk about this weird topic that I didn't understand at all called tax loss harvesting. What's that about?
Tax loss harvesting, first of all, applies, well, any age, but it applies to after-tax accounts, brokerage accounts. And, I just touched on a term, capital gain, and that's going to be in play going over this particular concept of tax loss harvesting. So if you have a portfolio, an after-tax portfolio, and it's in a whole bunch of stocks and funds and all that sort of thing, in the real world, every one of those securities is going up or down in value. And sometimes when you make an investment in a particular stock, let's say, it actually goes down in value, Charisse. Even my clients.
No way.
Yes, we do. We invest in securities that do go down in value sometimes.
How dare you?
I know it. Now, nobody wants to lose money. I get it. However, if you sell a security at a loss, then it's somewhat of a silver lining. If you bought a stock for 10 grand, it's now worth $5,000 when you look at your statement. And it could be for any variety of reasons. It could have nothing to do with the particular company, but nonetheless, there it is. You invested 10 grand, it's worth 5. Tax loss harvesting would be a decision to sell that stock, capture a $5,000 loss. It's called a capital loss as opposed to a capital gain. And then that $5,000 capital loss, you can use that to offset up to $5,000 in capital gains in other securities in your portfolio you sell at a profit. Like now, in a particular calendar year, let's say the only capital gain or loss is that single $5,000 capital loss, then you would be able to deduct $3,000 of that $5,000 loss off your taxes. So as an example, $3,000 of the salary that you earned and were going to be taxable on would not be taxable anymore. Now, the $2,000 that you were unable to use because you had $5,000 a loss, you deducted $3,000. That $2,000 is considered a loss carryover that you can use next year or in a future year. So that's so we're always looking at a portfolio, obviously wanting money positioned in securities that are going to do well from a rate of return standpoint. But one example, Charisse, I use a couple of companies that most of our audience is familiar with, Home Depot and Lowe's. Both are, as companies, are playing in the same sandbox. You may have a preference, Charisse. I think my wife, Dawn, probably prefers Lowe's, but they basically do the same thing. And just as an example, let's say that we had Lowe's stock in your portfolio and we bought it for 10 grand. And then for whatever reason, maybe there was a world event or something going on in the overall economy that dragged down the value of Lowe's stock to $5,000. Well, even if it had nothing to do with Lowe's, and even if I felt that holding on to Lowe's might be a good idea, what we might do is sell the Lowe's stock in the same for 5 grand, capturing or harvesting $5,000 loss, immediately invest that in Home Depot stock. Because those stocks are highly correlated up or down, at least historically. And so that would not really change the portfolio risk and diversification of the client, the hypothetical client I'm talking about. And so if circumstances were to allow a low stock to rebound, they likely would also help the Home Depot stock go up. Again, this is hypothetical. It's based on the historical. But that would be a way to not substantively change the portfolio, but capture a $5,000 loss without being out of the market.
And that's any age.
Yes.
That's not just retirement plan.
Yeah, that strategy does not apply to Roth IRAs or traditional IRAs. It's after-tax brokerage accounts.
Can you talk a little bit about Roth IRAs? I always hear about it. There's memes and stories on Facebook and social media all the time about a guy who used it for a tremendous gain. Tell me what your take is on the best strategy for using a Roth.
So you get your advice from memes and Facebook?
No, I'm just curious.
I know you are. A Roth IRA, what's that?
I get my advice from you.
Well, that's a great place.
Yeah.
No, there's two ways to get money into a Roth IRA, but what a Roth IRA is once the money's there is it's a tax-free account. You can invest it in anything you want, certificate of deposit, money market, individual stocks, it's effectively whatever. And it grows tax-free over time. You can withdraw it tax-free. It can be inherited tax-free. So once the money's in a Roth IRA, for all intents and purposes, you have a moat around that account that keeps the IRS out. Now, there's two ways to get money into a Roth IRA. One way is a contribution. And to make a Roth contribution, you must have earned income. I know your husband, Mike, feels he earned his pension. That's not earned income. Social Security for our audience. I know that you put a lot of money into the system. You felt you earned it. That's true in the English language, but the IRS does not consider Social Security income as earned income. By earned income, Charisse, it means through employment.
Oh, okay.
Or if you're a business owner, kind of same thing in that regard.
Right.
If you have earned income, then you can contribute up to $7,000 in 2024 to a Roth. If you've had your 50th birthday, I think maybe you have, I know I have,
Yep.
then it can be $8,000 into a Roth IRA. Now, on the higher scale of income, for whether you're single or married, it is possible to make too much money where the IRS disallows contributing to a Roth IRA. And I don't have those exact numbers, but they approach a couple 100,000 just to give some people an idea of scale. Now, the other way to get money into a Roth IRA, and this is applicable to most people, is called a Roth conversion. Particularly for those people listening to us that are closer to retirement or in retirement, they likely had a 401k. They may have rolled that over to an IRA. So a Roth conversion is where you take a taxable traditional IRA money, and it doesn't matter what your income is, it doesn't matter what your age is. You can convert as little or as much from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA as you would like. Now, a traditional IRA, typically pre-tax money where all withdrawals are subject to income tax. And so I guess what is needed to look at in tax planning is, Charisse, if we were going to do a Roth conversion out of your traditional IRA of $20,000, we would want to know your overall tax situation, because when we transfer the 20 grand from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA, the tax impact of that 20 grand is exactly the same as if we sent the 20 grand to your checking account so you could go on a vacation or have fun with it. So whatever amount is converted to a Roth is subject to income tax as ordinary income. But if we look at the overall income in a household and we make a strategic decision to stay within a particular tax bracket, in other words, this is a lot of the tax planning is fact-based. It's as in contrast to picking ABC stock or XYZ stock, which we really don't know. But once the money's in that Roth, then you know it's in a tax-free position for the rest of your life. And under current law, if it was your Roth IRA, Charisse, and you were to pass away, and then it's Mike's Roth IRA, still growing tax-free as if it was his loan. And then beyond the second spouse to pass away, and I know you have 2 children, your 2 children could continue to let that Roth IRA grow tax-free for a decade beyond the second of you and Mike to pass away. So it's a phenomenal long-term tax-free growth strategy.
Yeah, sounds pretty good.
But the price to pay is, that's one of the things why we ask our clients to upload their tax return every year, is there are a lot of sources, but holistically, we want to see where does the client fall on the tax brackets. Are they using standard or itemized deductions? Of course, what money do they require or want for lifestyle? But I think too many people, Charisse, and maybe this is about where we can wind this down, is nobody likes to pay taxes, or at least that's been my experience. And when you have a pre-tax account like a traditional IRA or 401k, people don't necessarily understand that those are tax deferred, not tax free. Eventually, that money is going to be subject to income tax. It's just a matter of when and at what rate. So oftentimes, or worth looking at, is if we go ahead and pay some of that tax liability over a series of years where we stay at lower income tax brackets, that may be a strategy worth considering instead of head in the sand, let the traditional IRA grow until the IRS requires you to take out a substantial amount, or you pass away. Okay, you and Mike married, filing a joint return. When one of you passes away, the survivor of you two will have to file as a single person, and it is not unusual for then filing single, the tax burden to go up. Yet you still have all of that pre-tax IRA that has to come out, possibly at a higher tax bracket simply because you lost your husband. So there's a lot of things we look at. A lot of times when parents die, they're in a lower tax bracket than their kids who are in their mid-50s earning the most income of their life. So that's another thing we talk to clients about that might be in their 70s and 80s about, hey, if you pay taxes at this 12% bracket, rather than you passing away and your very successful son or daughter inherit it and they're in the 35% bracket, because that's how it will be taxed if you have an inherited IRA that doesn't escape taxation. It just means the distributions will now be subject to taxes of your son or daughter.
That is really good information.
It is, it's still not easy for people to choose to pay taxes if they can just stick their head in the sand for another year and not pay taxes. But it eventually catches up. But that's my challenge.
Right. And that's why you get paid the big bucks to help people.
Well, I get paid some bucks anyway. I don't know how big they are. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But, for anybody in our audience, we're easy to get a hold of. Just go to our website, www.poterack, that's POTERACK.net, www.poterack.net. We're also out there on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, formerly Twitter. And we'd love to hear from you. If you want to learn more about PCA, if you want to get acquainted, Anna Hopkins has worked with me for 17 years, is likely your first stop. She knows the answers to all of the tough questions. But Charisse, it's great to have you in on the podcast. Hopefully this hasn't chased you away for having many more.
No way.
No way?
No way. Thank you.
All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your week, Charisse. We'll talk soon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. To ask questions about topics covered during the show or get a copy of Making It Count, Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet by Ryan Poterack, visit www.poterack.net or give us a call at 704-366-5776. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Poterack Capital Advisory. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Poterack Capital Advisory does not offer legal or tax advice. Please consult the appropriate professional regarding your individual circumstances. Nothing contained herein is to be considered a solicitation, research material, an investment recommendation, or advice of any kind. The information contained herein may contain information that is subject to change without notice. Any investments or strategies referenced herein do not take into account the investment objectives, financial situation, or particular needs of any specific person.
Product sustainability must be independently determined for each individual investor. Poterack Capital Advisory explicitly disclaims any responsibility for product suitability or suitability determinations related to individual investors.